Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and for many, the decision to pick up the Switch 2 has really hinged on the premise of the Switch 2 keycard. You have two camps that have expressed their opinions on how they feel about the keycard, and a lot of those opinions are really rooted in whether or not your gameplay or the games you like to play are first-party Nintendo games versus third-party Nintendo games. You have folks who buy Nintendo products knowing that they're primarily going to be playing Mario, Donkey Kong, and Zelda games. And they enjoy those games because of all of the effort and attention that Nintendo puts into making those gameplay experiences spectacular. And I'm never going to hate on Nintendo for how much focus and attention that they place on their own IP. In fact, it's smart, and it's a big part of the reason why they are still number one over 35 years and running when it comes to the powerhouses of gaming, when you consider Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, and then companies that no longer even produce consoles like the Sega Genesis or Sega for that matter, when you consider companies like Neo Geo, so on and so forth. Nintendo has maintained their number one spot because of their focus and attention on their own games. I can't remember a generation ever where Nintendo prioritized third-party developers. They just don't do that. And from a business standpoint, it's pretty smart. It's how you maintain the stronghold. But they're smart enough to know that they cannot completely ignore third-party developers because they need that level of cachet to draw in all types of gamers, right? Not everyone wants to play Mario all day. Not everyone wants to play Zelda all day. There are some people who do want to play maybe a first-person shooter game, or maybe there are some folks who want to play a real-time strategy game or an open-world action-adventure game that's not as cutesy as a Zelda. Maybe they want something a little bit more violent, something that feels a little bit more adult. And be that as it may, Nintendo might allow these games to be played on their platform, but they're not going to prioritize them. And this is essentially what we're seeing with the key card, which is why I think if you are someone who thoroughly enjoys first-party Nintendo games, then the Switch 2 is going to be for you, because it's clear that the only games, or not the only games, but the majority of the games that will come complete on a cartridge, meaning you get the entire game on a cartridge, is going to be their first-party games, with games like Mario Kart World and pretty much any other first-party Nintendo game that they release. The games that are getting kind of like that secondhand stepchild treatment are really going to be your third-party games. And so if you care about the third-party experience, then you're probably going to not be as enthused to pick up the Switch 2 right away. And you're probably going to be more willing to sit back and just wait and see what happens with the keycard situation, because from what I've seen and heard, it doesn't really seem like the whole situation has been fleshed out completely. And I feel like there's going to be more developments to come when you consider how the key card is used and how Nintendo decides to navigate that. It's clear that they want to push more people to their online platform. It's clear that they're trying to push consumers towards the digital future that is inevitable. But again, it all really depends on where you fall. Now, I can always appreciate a good first-party Nintendo game. Don't get me wrong, I love my Super Mario games. As you can see, I do have my copy of Super Mario 3D All-Stars, along with games like Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Metroid Prime, right? There are certain first-party games that are just undeniable from Nintendo. But overall, I am definitely more of a third-party type of gamer. Specifically, I love my modern retro classics, and I love really just kind of these indie titles that you don't typically see. Games like Vasara Collection or Mighty Goose. Those are games that I thoroughly enjoy. Also, Steel Assault and Slave Zero X. These are not the types of games, while they're fun and while they're amazing, these are not the types of games that Nintendo is going to prioritize in terms of making sure that the full game is on the cartridge. Now, there has been a theory, I don't know if it's been proven yet, that there are really going to be only two types of Switch 2 cartridges that Nintendo is offering to third-party developers. Either you can utilize their 1 gig cart, which most games will not fit on a 1 gig cartridge, or you can choose their 64 gig cart, which will probably be able to kind of facilitate almost any game that you might want to put on that. However, it's going to come with a much larger price tag for a third-party developer to pay when it comes to putting their game on a Switch cartridge. So obviously the happy medium is then going to be the key card, which still allows the placebo effect of having physical media, which you don't really have because it is internet dependent, it is download dependent. Um, but it still allows these third-party developers to get that marketing by having their game on a shelf or having something physical on a shelf in a store that consumers like you and me can see and decide to buy should we choose to do so. But if you are, again, a third-party game player and you like to have those games physically, the proposition of having the majority of those games coming in this key card format is not going to be very attractive to you, and you're probably not going to be that enthused to dive in head first when it comes to that. Now, from what I understand, on the original Switch, there were a lot of different file sizes offered when it came to their cartridges, anywhere from 1 gigs to 2 to 4 to 8 to 24, 32, so on and so forth, which obviously allows a much greater level of flexibility for third-party developers to kind of have their games put onto the Switch platform. Nevertheless, Switch games, even the first Switch, those games were still typically more expensive than their PlayStation 4 or their Xbox One counterparts, just because cartridges are more expensive. And so essentially what Nintendo's doing is they're continuing the same thing that they've done for a long time, which is put the game in a stronghold. You know, they've got the game in a chokehold, no pun intended. And they're prioritizing their own IP. Obviously, all of their games are going to be on fully and completely on the cartridges that they're produced on. But that's something that they should do. And at the same time, they're not kind of alienating themselves from third parties by not allowing them to have games on the Switch. They're giving them a happy alternative that I think, like I said, it does create an avenue for people to play these third-party games on a Switch too, but it's not the preferred way for those who do appreciate physical games. And I think there still is a strong community that appreciates physical games. And I think this is Nintendo's placebo. This is what they're trying to do for that sector of the gaming community. But ultimately, for me, because I do appreciate physical games and because the majority of the games that I do play, even on the Switch, are third-party titles, this is a big part of the reason why, for me, the Switch 2 is not an immediate necessity. I don't need to have it right away. And I think that ultimately is what is going to determine whether or not you feel the need to purchase a Switch 2 right away. Like I said, the majority of the folks, in my opinion, that are going after the Switch on day one are diehard Nintendo fans. They enjoy first-party Nintendo games. They want that Mario Kart, that Mario World, that Donkey Kong, that Zelda experience straight out of the gate. And, they're anxious for it. And so they're going to be first in line to get it. While I can appreciate all of those experiences, I am not that wrapped up in the Nintendo ecosystem to where I need it that badly. I've always been a Sega Genesis dude from back in the day anyway, and I've always thought that the Sega Genesis had a much more robust library than the Super Nintendo because of their willingness to work with third-party developers who put a ton of amazing games on the Sega Genesis. I think that chokehold somewhat that Nintendo has when it comes to the games that they allow on their platforms, it's good business. It's good business for them. It's how they've stayed number one. But for me, as a gamer who prefers third-party games more, just in general, it doesn't mean I don't want to Switch to. It doesn't mean I don't like Nintendo first-party games. It just means that they're not the priority for me. Give me my third-party games, and I'll get to the first-party games later, because one thing that we know about Nintendo is their games are always going to be accessible. You're always going to be able to play an NES game, a Super Nintendo game, a GameCube game, because of how much Nintendo prioritizes their first-party games. These third-party games that don't get as much attention, these are the ones that are going to slip through the cracks, and years down the line, you're going to be wondering, how can I get my hands on this type of game? Those are the ones that I feel need more attention when it comes to preserving these types of games, because they're going to probably be last on the list to add to any type of online repository or eShop or anything like that. So those are my opinions on the two types of individuals that I think are looking at the key card situation, and how they're using the idea of the key card to determine whether or not they're going to pick up a Switch 2 at all, or if they're going to pick it up right away. But let me know your thoughts on this. Are you a first party Nintendo gamer? Do you love all of their first party games? Do you prioritize third party games? Or are you somewhere in between? Let me know your thoughts on this, and I'll catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.